Thumbcoast TV and WGRT bring you St. Clair County at the Mackinac Policy Conference. Sponsored by the Community Foundation of St. Clair County, Michigan Mutual, and Eastern Michigan Bank.
Conference. I'm joined by Chuck Marhsall, president of ITC Michigan. I apologize.
Yes,
so Chuck, how are you today?
All is well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Happy to be on the show here.
So wheeling and dealing and wheeling. What for all those at home back in our home of St. Clair County, can you tell folks what presence does ITC have in kind of the Thumb region?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do so. So the thing that's a little bit unique about ITC is probably all of the residents of St. Clair County see our assets every day. You just don't realize that it's ITC that you're looking at.
Yeah.
So ITC owns the high voltage electric transmission system, effectively and commonly referred to as the grid. So the big backbone infrastructure that takes generation from the generation sources and then delivers it to your local distribution company. So your local distribution company being DTE. So ITC owns the assets that are really sort of the linkage between those two. We take generation, toll it through our system, and then deliver it to your distribution utility to serve your homes, your businesses, industry, and so forth.
Hey, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of folks don't realize that. I spent a brief time in Texas, and that's how I learned it was. It was a very interesting concept, and it was like, you mean DTE doesn't own these power lines and the poles and all the different things? So with that comes a unique responsibility of ensuring that the grid is strong. Is there anything? I thought I read something recently that you guys did a big project for the Thumb region. Is that correct?
We did, yeah.
Okay.
So there's been a lot going on the last 21 years. So I've been with ITC. ITC's been in existence 22 years. I've been with ITC 21 of those 22 years. So I've seen a lot. We spent the better part, I would say, of the last 15 years largely investing in transmission infrastructure to improve the reliability and the resilience of the grid, because for that period of time, the demands placed upon the grid were relatively static, but what we're seeing in the last several years is the demands placed upon the grid are rapidly changing. And so that puts us in a position as the grid owner that we're trying to be proactive in a reactive world, right? So when you have new generation resources coming online, when you have economic development going on in the state, you talk about even something like electric vehicles, and I know electric vehicles can be kind of a little bit of a contentious topic, but the reality is, I just saw a data point yesterday, sales domestically in 2024, I think 8% of the vehicles were EVs, right? Okay. So they are having a stronger presence, they've got onshoring. So we as the grid owner, we need to proactively build the right infrastructure before the customers demand that. So I think the project that you're referring to is a project we called the Thumb Loop Project. Yeah. And so that was constructed and I think energized in 2015. And so it really reinforced the grid throughout the Thumb. And so now we've got a grid that can support economic development. We've got a grid that can support generator interconnections and really just the reliability and resiliency of that entire area. To that end, I know we work closely with St. Clair Economic Development Alliance, and so that is our focus, that is our thrust. Like, we exist to serve our customers, and that's our priority.
Right, well, and that's huge, right? To be competitive. We've talked a lot about over the last couple of years. People growth and retaining people and recruiting people, and it's hard to attract businesses when the infrastructure that they need to power that business, and whether it's a coffee shop or whether it's an EV manufacturer, if we're having to put infrastructure in the ground when they want it. And you guys have done a lot of work in ensuring that infrastructure in St. Clair County is ready to rock and roll. So we put shovels in the ground and we can hook up. Is that correct?
Incredibly strong infrastructure in St. Clair County. Yeah, we've got a robust and resilient grid. And to that end, right, is like Michigan's a great place to be. It's a great place to live. And for it to continue to be that and to continue to prosper, we need the right infrastructure in place because that underpins our entire economy.
100%. And I want to switch topics here. I read something that there was, or I heard recently, 20 tornadoes. Is that correct? 20 tornadoes.
Right.
Is that just in Michigan?
That is in Michigan.
In
yes.
Michigan. So what demands? Obviously, I'm not sure what the world record of tornadoes in Michigan before
Hopefully
June
it's not the
1.
new tornado alley.
right.
Yeah.
As in Oklahoma, totally normal. In Michigan,
Right,
that's a little abnormal. What kind of things? Because you did mention kind of being proactive in a reactive space.
Yeah.
What kind of things is ITC looking as weather patterns change or provide a thorn in the side, as you will, in terms of infrastructure and ultimately power delivery?
Yeah. I think there's a couple things immediately that come to mind. One is you need to replace the aging infrastructure. And so historically we used a lot of wood poles. We don't use wood poles anymore. ITC hasn't used wood poles for the last 20 years.
Okay.
And so you need the right type of infrastructure that can truly weather the storm. And you need diversity in infrastructure, right? The reason that we are a grid is because that's the physical interconnections. There's not just a single path A to B. And so to the extent we have the ability to further enhance that grid structure and have more ties, you have a more reliable and resilient system. And then also you need diversification of generation resources. Okay. So if you lose a generation resource, there's other generation resources. So that's why it's a priority of ITC on both sides of the equation, not to just serve customers. That's certainly a priority, customers being load, right, residential, retail, commercial, but we also need to interconnect the generation on the other side so we can adequately serve those and have the capacity to do so. So if you lose a generation resource in a storm, there's others that are available.
Yeah, kind of almost a redundancy plan.
A redundancy plan.
Yeah,
yes.
and so what's changed? You said you've been in the game 21 years, so obviously more phones getting plugged in, more devices getting plugged in.
Yes.
On the energy generation side, what has changed in that space? Because obviously we've navigated from the traditional model, I'm sure, when you started with ITC.
So I think what's probably underappreciated is we have been living off, right, not just the legacy transmission system, but also the legacy generation system.
Yeah.
And a lot of these assets are in kind of an industry jargon nearing end of life.
Yeah.
And when you get in end of life, you need to retire that asset and they need to replace that generation. And so that's, I think, what we're grappling with as an industry is like, what is the appropriate generation mix on a going forward basis? So there's a lot of discussions around SMR, nuclear generation. Palisades is being repowered, right? It's supposed to come online, I think, this year, actually, in 2025. The question remains is, are we going to see additional new gas resources show up in the state of Michigan? What we are definitively seeing is a lot of renewable resources show up in the state of Michigan. And so often people talk about sort of the all of the above generation mix.
Yeah.
And in my view is I think we're doing a good job connecting the renewable generation. I think the concern and the risk of the grid today is we need access to sort of that dispatchable generation. So when the storm does pass, when the sun's not shining, when the wind's not blowing, you have generation to keep the lights on.
The backup plan.
The backup plan.
I get it.
Yes, the base load.
Well, I love it, Chuck. Again, I think you said it the best way. You do important work that nobody sees, but we are sure appreciative of that work that you do.
We enjoy doing it.
I love it. Thank you for joining us from the Mackinac Policy Conference.
To hear more from this conversation, visit thumbcoast.tv.